Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. My name is Mars, and today we're going to do the complete guide for Machina. And if I'm being honest, I think he's a simple unit with a simple kit, so this should be pretty quick. Now, before we jump into anything else, let's take a look at his Trustmaster reward. Opposition is a materia that grants 50% attack when equipped with clothes and a sword, and it gives 10% HP, as well as boosting attack, defense, magic, and spirit at the beginning of battle. This is a pretty good TMR for himself, as well as other people who like to equip swords and clothes, such as Queen or Titus. And there are, of course, several others you may be able to find, like Lightning, among others. So, not a bad Trustmaster reward. I don't personally think it's worth chasing, but it is a good one. Now, his Super TMR is also okay. It's a 163 attack sword that grants the wielder dual wield. Now, this is nice because it does give a pretty high amount of attack and it grants dual wield, but the thing that is worth noting is that most units that prefer dual wield already have dual wield as part of their kit. So units like Reagan or Onion Knight, they already have the dual wield passive. Units like Sephiroth are also not the best to use this with because he would, at 7 stars, prefer to equip his own TMR, which limits his elemental options. And he may even get dual wield at 7 stars as part of his kit, I don't remember. And then other units who would actually benefit from this, such as Prish, who typically prefers dual wield but does not have dual wield in her kit, she cannot equip swords. So, in my opinion, not the most amazing STMR, but if you happen to get it, I don't think it's a bad thing to go for because I personally can't see a situation where you would want 2 Machinas. Now, looking at his kit, Machina does basically fill 2 roles, although not usually at the same time. Number 1, and the one that most people are talking about, is that he fills the role of Breaker. He has 2 abilities, Siphon Sword and Stunning Slash, that break attack and magic or defense and spirit respectively, and they do breaks on a decaying scale, meaning that turn 1, each of the breaks, so Siphon in this case, will break defense and spirit by 70% for 1 turn, 55% for 3 turns, and 45% for 5 turns, meaning that you get the most benefit on the first turn, with decreasing benefit on turns following. The same applies to Stunning Slash when it breaks attack and magic. It's the same 70, 55, and 45% across 5 turns. These are very strong on-demand breaks, which makes him useful if you have a single opponent that you want to break attack and magic for mitigating incoming damage, or if you want to break defense and spirit by quite a bit for a turn 1 kill, or just burst damage in general. Now, supplementing his support kit, he has Guardian Blades and Enforced Magic Barrier. These skills respectively grant physical or magical damage mitigation for the party for 3 turns. Guardian Blades also gives a chance to counter physical attacks with physical damage to 1 enemy for 3 turns to all allies. So this increases your counter opportunities with your team, which can increase your Limit Burst crystal gain, which is helpful for parties that rely on Limit Bursts. Enforced Magic Barrier also grants 100% resistance to Spirit Breaking for all allies. So if you go into a fight where Spirit Breaking is a particular issue, this may come in handy. I will note that these skills are not the most impressive in my opinion because we do have 30% physical mitigation from Barusa's TMR, and that's an item that anybody can equip, and we have 40% physical mitigation from Pod 153, which is 9S's Trustmaster reward, if you happen to have him. So in my opinion, these skills are okay, but they're not, I don't know, they don't really wow me in any particular way. So his secondary role is to do physical damage, and he does that primarily through Element Eiger. This ability imperils Ice, Fire, and Lightning by 60% for 3 turns to a single enemy, and it is part of the Absolute Mirror of Equity family, and this is a chaining family that doesn't currently exist. However, in the future, it will exist, and it will be quite a large family. Absolute Mirror of Equity is the family named after CG Laswell for the namesake move, and it includes people like CG Reagan, I believe, as well as CG Agstar. So it is a pretty strong chaining family, although the people that he is part of the family with typically overshadow him in damage, but it is certainly a role that you can use him for. Now, as far as cooldown skills are concerned, he does have Summon Eidolon like all of the other Type 0 units, so he can KO himself and completely fill the Esper gauge. In addition to that, he has Awakening, which reduces his own defense by 30%, which in my opinion is almost nothing. It restores all of his HP, it buffs his attack by 200% for 5 turns, and it enables him to use Rush Blade for 4 turns. Now, Rush Blade is another chaining ability that does a 10 times modifier, which is nearly twice as much damage as his regular element Eiger. However, it does have the drawback of not appearing, at least to my knowledge, to be a part of any chaining family, which means that you would have to chain it with a dupe. So, much higher damage, but you can only chain it with another Machina, as far as I'm aware. And honest to goodness, this doesn't really impress me because Prish has a 10 times modifier skill, so, you know, and she can spam that one. She doesn't have to use a cooldown ability to use it. So, those are the majority of his abilities. His Limit Burst is also worthy of note because it deals a fair amount of damage and it reduces attack and magic for one enemy by 79% when fully maxed out, which is a very strong Limit Burst. That means that your enemies are doing, I believe it's as low as like 1/5 of the damage that they normally would be, or it's reduced by an insane amount. So if a break is stronger by 5%, you get more than just 5% benefit. So even though we have units that can break by 74%, having that 79% gives an exponential benefit when compared to the other Limit Burst. So then comes the question, what do you do for Machina's builds? Honestly, because he is an innate dual wielder, that's all you want to do. Build him up with dual wield, give him an element weapon that matches ice, thunder, or fire if you want to use him for damage. Otherwise, you can choose to build him purely for support. And if you build him for support, you can choose to do other things like giving him support items or equipment that allow him to do other things with his turn if you need him to do that, such as Eccentric off of Riku's pouch for limit burst fill rate or other things like that. Because what I will say is that I'm not the most impressed with with Machina. Personally, I completely dislike him. His decaying breaks to me are they're not great. And the only reason that they're not great is because we know better things are coming. So to have 70%, but only for one turn, to either Defense and Spirit or Attack and Magic, means that he cannot provide 100% uptime breaks against either Attack and Magic or Defense and Spirit. He can only do 70% for one of them at a time. And this is kind of a pain if your team is really depending on the Attack and Magic break to survive, or you need the Defense and Spirit break to do the damage necessary to clear the fight or whatever. It just makes it a little bit inconsistent. And so when you compare that to units like even CG Lid, her Limit Burst fills very quickly. It's an AoE 70% limit. It's an AoE 70% full break to all enemies, and it lasts for 2 turns, meaning that she is very reliable. Like, you can reliably break all of your enemies, all of their stats by 70%. And even then, if, for example, I don't have her Limit Burst up for turn 1, or I don't have it up for whatever reason, I can just use one of her arms or armor eraser skills, and it's all enemies for 5 turns. And I honestly think that the all enemies part of it is what makes her amazing, because even though we do have many opponents that are just single opponents, such as like Odin or some of our other recent trials like the Iron Giant or things like that, we do have many bosses that come in a pack or in a group. So if we look real quick at our nemesis, you can see the Mad Doll. There's a group of enemies that you want to break all of them. Venomous Vines you need to AoE break. This one, breaks are not really necessary. Great Explosion you want AoE break. Torturous Trio, breaks are not really necessary, but if you did, you would want them AoE to Attack and Magic against the Blood Moon. This one is single target, breaks are not really relevant. Breaks are kind of not relevant. AoE. AoE is helpful, but not necessary. This one, I don't remember too much. Anyways, you kind of get the idea that people may play it down like, oh, you can get away with single target breaks, and it's like, yes, that's true, as long as there's only one enemy. Most of the Scorn fights, actually not even most of them, some of them, you can benefit from that. So like Two-Headed Dragon, Surging Menace, Scorn of Intangier, and the rest on down, those are all single targets, sure. But Antonella, which is actually a very challenging fight, that one you need AoE breaks for. Scorn of Marching Beasts, most enemies are resistant to some form of breaks, so breaks are kind of up to you, but AoE is also helpful. So in my opinion, Machina is very limited in his use, especially if you're relying on the 70% break, because it means that he will do nothing but spam that 70% break over and over again to maintain uptime on it. Meaning that in battle, he has worse flexibility than most other units in the game. I would far rather take a unit like Lauren, who has an AoE 50% attack and magic break or AoE 50% defensive spirit break that lasts for 5 turns, and then allow her to do other things with her kit. The same goes for units like CG Lid or even Warrior of Light or Bosch. In my opinion, they are better units than Machina in the role of breaking. So then comes the question of damage. Is Machina's damage worth making him a part of your roster? And in my opinion, right now the answer is no, because he has no chaining partners. Perhaps later he may become more of a mainstay or more of a staple for people who have a lot of absolute mirror of equity members of their party, but in my opinion, anybody who's hyping him, I think, is overhyping him. If you think he's cool, then cool. And you know, as far as the question of like, oh, is he worth pulling for? Well, I mean, you guys know what I say. If you want a unit, pull for the unit. From a TMR perspective, his TMR is pretty good. From an STMR perspective, it's completely passable. You don't need it. From a breaking standpoint, in my opinion, he is not that great. Simply because he would have to spam those breaks over and over again for 100% uptime, or you have to settle for 55% breaks at 100% uptime, or you have the problem of you have more than one enemy and so you can't even use him. So, from a breaker perspective, not really worth it in my opinion. In my opinion, he's strictly inferior. And to give you some context, Lauren and Auron should ideally be coming soon to the game. Lauren, of course, is one of the most powerful units to ever be released, and then Auron came later in the Japanese version and was on a similar level of power. And the reason for that is because they both have cooldown skills that they can use on the first turn that AoE break enemies by 70% all stats for 3 turns, meaning that turn 1 they can have a limit, or they can have an AoE break that's as powerful as Lid's Limit Burst without having to fill a Limit Burst bar, and that's obviously the biggest benefit. And then from there, both of them have Limit Bursts that provide AoE 74% breaks that also imperil multiple elements. In Lauren's case, she imperils Thunder, Light, and Wind. Auron imperils Fire, and some others. I don't really remember. I only glanced at his kit when he came out, and I was like, cool, he's fire-flavored Lauren. So if you have Lauren and you have her ready to go, you can easily ignore Machina. If you plan on using a unit of choice on Lauren, or you plan on pulling for Axstar, you can easily ignore Machina. Even if you have units like Knight Delita, which may be a bit of a shock. Personally, I would use Knight Delita in a fight long before I ever used Machina, because he can do more things. Knight Delita is amazing because his Limit Burst is a 74% break to a single enemy to their attack and magic. In addition, it also breaks defense by 74%, which helps physical damage dealers, and it imperils Thunder by 100%, meaning that if indeed you are facing a single opponent and you have his Limit Burst up and it lasts for 3 turns, it's very easy to nerf an enemy's damage into the ground while buffing the damage of your physical damage dealers. Thunder Hyos rejoice. In my opinion, Knight Delita is strictly superior to Machina simply because he provides more, while having the option of doing more on his off turns. Machina cannot boast the same level of flexibility, but he does have unique support elements that Knight Delita does not have. So, Anyways, kind of a toss either way. It's completely up to you. The other person that I would encourage people to look at if they're looking for a breaker is goodness, that would be OP. Beatrix. Beatrix also provides an AoE attack and magic break with some built-in mitigation for the party. So she also is a solid breaking option. She is not as good as units like Lauren or Axstar down the road. However, she, in my opinion, is strictly better than Machina because having to refresh those on-demand breaks so frequently and only having single target breaks, in my opinion, puts him in the ground. The thing that is worth noting, at least, is that as a 6-star unit, he is quite good. If you compare him, of course, to other 6-star units, because he gets all of his best abilities by level 100. So he gets both of his on-demand breaks, he gets his damage mitigation skills, and he gets Element Eiger, all by level 100, meaning that as far as 6-star units goes, he's actually quite competent. So, if you do happen to pull one, you can actually make quite good use of him. Whereas there are many other 7-star units that, if they are in their 6-star form, they do not perform well. In Machina's case, he does quite well, even at 6 stars. So that's something to keep in mind if you happen to pull one. So I think I've rambled on enough about my opinions regarding Machina and his utility. I feel like he was overhyped by a number of people, and people were saying, oh, I really need a breaker. Trust me. Listen to what I'm saying. As soon as you get your hands on a unit like Lauren or Aron, or I mean, you don't even need them at this point in the game. You can do 50% breaks and you're just fine. You can beat all content with 50% breaks right now. It will be a while before those other breaks are really necessary. Don't feel like you have to pull for Machina. Don't feel like he's worth a unit of choice set of tickets. Pull for him if you want him. Pull for him if you want the TMR because you are using a sword user who also equips clothes. Like, there are certainly reasons to pull for him, but in my opinion, none of them are compelling enough to kind of dismiss the fact that we are on the horizon of significantly better breakers. Aron is likely going to come to the global version of the game within the next couple of months, so if you can hold out for a couple months, that's a much better investment of your resources. So, that has been the Machina Complete Guide. Let me know if you liked it, let me know what you would like to see in the next video in the comments below, and I will see everybody in the next one.